Good afternoon, members of Parliament, support staff, visitors in the public tribune, radio listeners, TV viewers, and those following via social media. Welcome to this meeting of the Committee of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, number 5 of today, Monday, June 20th, 2022. I would like to give a special welcome to the civil servants of the Ministry of TEATT present here today, Ms. Mei-Lin Chun, Ms. G. Arundel, Ms. C. Franken, and Mr. L. Wilson. We have established a quorum of 8 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received notice of absence from the following committee members: MP William Marlin and MP Christopher Emmanuel. Are there any other notifications? MP Brison, you have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, colleague members of Parliament, Mr. Chairman, and those following this meeting. Mr. Chairman, I received a message from MP Arundel that he had sent an email concerning the fact that he was not good, if that can be noted as well in terms of his absence for the rest of this week.
Noted. Thank you for your notifications. The agenda point for this meeting are: Point 1, presentation by Maarten Tourist Bureau on an overview of their marketing and product development plans, including the use of increased funds provided by the 2021 and 2022 budget amendments. Agenda point 2, presentation by the TEATT Inspection Department on an overview of activities planned in 2022, including the use of increased funds provided by the 2021 and 22 budget amendments for Bavpol training and public transportation legislation under IS 552/21-22 dated February 14, 2022. This meeting was requested by MP Rolando Brison. We go over to the agenda point 1.
Mr. Chairman, a proposal of order.
Yes, MP Brison.
Mr. Chairman, I think you might recall we were having a bit of a discussion as to whether maybe it would be a good idea to go with agenda point 2 first, since they have a shorter presentation, and then go back to agenda point 1, which might be more elaborate. That would be my proposal, to go, if the rest of the committee agrees, and if the panel was there.
I think, yeah, we had a discussion, and if I see to my right, if they are in agreement and if all members of Parliament in the committee in agreement, we can do that. We can swap the point 2 to 1 and 1 to 2. If I don't see any objections, then I think we should proceed according to that. Thank you. So now the agenda point 2 will become agenda point 1 and vice versa. On February 14th, 2022, Parliament received a letter IS/552/2021-22 from MPR Brison with the request that a meeting of TEATT committee be convened with the above mentioned agenda points. Hence today this meeting. At this time, I would first like to give the floor to the requester of this meeting, MP Brison, to elucidate his request on agenda point 1, which has been changed now. MP Brison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, a good afternoon to my colleague, members of the committee, and to the team from the TEATT. I don't like to say former colleagues. They're still my colleagues in my heart. All of the members from the Maarten Tourist Bureau and the head of the inspection here with us. Mr. Chairman, the purpose of this particular agenda point was to have the opportunity for us to hear from the inspection department of the Ministry of TEATT on some of the progress on things that they have been working on, especially since the last 2 budget amendments or 2 budgets that have been passed have made some provisions for them to do some very important tasks, and I think it would have been good for us to hear if there's been some progress in that regard. Perhaps they have some more information they're going to share with us about the activities of the inspection department, but that's in essence what it is. I think it's good that the minister, in accordance with the rules of order, allowed the civil servants to brief us in a technical manner on some of the things happening within, on this agenda point, the inspection department, and then after to the St. Maarten Tourist Bureau.
Thank you, MP Brison. I would like now to give the floor to, I believe will be Mr. L. Wilson. Mr. L. Wilson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you and to the members of the committee. Once again, my name is Lucien Wilson, and I am the head of the inspection department for the Ministry of TEATT. I'm very grateful to the committee by way of MP Brison for giving me the opportunity to come to Parliament and present the planned activities of the department for this year. And this presentation was developed with that intention in mind. So if you could please cast your eyes on the screen. So yeah, the title speaks for itself. I wanted to start off with just a quote that I came across in preparing this presentation. In the new economics of service, frontline workers and customers need to be the center of management concern. And that was taken from the Harvard Business Review. The idea being that in modern recent management philosophy, as management, we need to be focused on giving service, and our people are employees, and that in turn would then lead to increase in revenue. Moving on, so what do we have planned? Right, that's the reason why I'm here today, to give elucidation to that. Planned activities for 2022. So we've narrowed them down to 4, or streamlined them to 4. We have enforcement against unlicensed business, ensuring fair competition in trade, capacity building and professional development, workforce automation and digitization. You will notice that out of the 4, the first 2 are more outward focused from an organizational standpoint, and the last 2 are more inward focused. The idea being that we wanted to have a balanced approach to how I manage the department. And then I will elucidate on each one of these as we go through the presentation. So, compliance and controls. We'll kind of work backward with the last two first, and then we end with the first 2 of them. Compliance and controls know the rules. So if we all play by the rules, we all win. And that also feeds into the fair trade and competition. So for our compliance controls, we have some sub-objectives, which is verification of business compliance and inform. So under the verification of business compliance, what that basically comes down to is ensuring that businesses conform to all applicable regulations, policies, standards, and of course the law. And a separate component of carrying out compliance controls is also to inform, because it's not only about enforcement, it's also informing the public about what their obligations are, what their rights are as well. So that's part of taking a more customer-centric approach, is to also provide the public, which we serve as public servants, with information and guidance on how to maintain or achieve compliance as part of improving the service that we render to the public. Some highlights so far. YTD means year to date. So businesses control year to date, we did 347. The largest number, which is something I personally found quite interesting, was the largest number of sole proprietors that we found so far is 29. We found on Lower Princess Quarter, LPQ, and 28% of the total businesses control were in Phillipsburg. I'll give you some more stats. So this graph, which is the types of business that were controlled and the controls by district. So on the right-hand side, you'll see the various types of legal form, whether it was an NV branch, an NV, a foundation, an Aimans Act that was registered at the chamber, or Aimans Act, in other words, a sole proprietor itself. Those businesses that we found that only had a chamber registration, and then we had BVs and BV branches. So you will see in the extreme left, Phillipsburg, by and large, still represented the lion's share of NVs that we controlled were found in Phillipsburg. And then you'll see in cul-de-sac, the orange, where you see 9, those were 9 sole proprietors that we found in Lower Princess Quarter. And then the differential colors speak for themselves. But by and large, Phillipsburg was still had the lion's share of businesses that we found and were controlled. Moving on, so this is verification of licenses present in the business. So one other form of compliance is that when we go to a business and we control the business, we verify that the business has a license in the business. That's another form of ensuring fair competition, because as a consumer, when you walk into a business, you want to make sure that, one, it is duly licensed. It's not operating illegally in any sort of manner. So we do those controls, and year to date, you can see January, February had a peak, and the lowest month for us was May. The reason why May was low is because we had some issues with our fleet in terms of vehicles, so that kind of hampered our ability to execute controls last month. But that has now been somewhat resolved. Moving on to the next slide. Vending, because that's also a form of economic activity. So here you will see in the 2 graphs broken down by vendors by district, as well as vending controls carried out. So once again, you will see Phillipsburg at the very bottom. 25 vendors were found in the district of Phillipsburg, where Lowest Princess Quarter was 8, Upper Princess Quarter, Cold Bay 3, and Cul-de-sac, where we found 1, being the smallest. And then the controls carried out January, February, you see March being the highest, and then April and May tapering off a bit. Of course, I'll show you in the next slide another visual representation of the data. So the number of vendors by category. So there's mobile vending, there's a standplatz for those vendors who are standplatz at a fixed location, and we also found 2 vendors who had their permits were in the process of being worked on. So you'll see it's broken down by not only the type of vending permit on the left-hand side, but going across, you see the types of goods that they offered for sale. So a grand total of 42 in total, but the vast majority of the type of vending permit that we came across was standplatz, so vendors who were fixed, and then mobile vending represented the second largest group. But the vast majority of vendors are fixed and are selling food and beverages, which totals a total of 36. And then we move on to another big category for the department, which is public transportation. Hopefully it's easier to read. So on the left we have the controls by district, so the number of controls by district, and then on the right we have the control frequency, so the number of times we've done controls in a specific category of public transportation. So you will see Phillipsburg represents about 51% of the controls we do are on this side of the hill, and then Simpson Bay makes up another 15%, Upper Princess Quarter 9%, Little Bay and Upper Princess Quarter are the same, and then the other districts are less. And then you will see on the right-hand side that buses represent 44% of the controls we do, and taxis 20%, tours are 18%, unregulated tours, which most people would refer to as the Gs, the really big buses, are 70%, and rentals represent, to date, 1%. The idea being now that as we go into the second half of the year, we'd kind of switch and spend more time focusing on smaller sectors. So we have a balanced approach to how we enforce. Moving on, so the type of action taken. So not only the controls and where do we control, but the type of actions taken. So you will see year to date, 61% of the public transportation operators that have been controlled, 61% we found to be compliant, meaning that we did not come across any infractions or major infractions. In the beginning of the year, as we all know, the ministerial regulations were still in effect and were being enforced. So you'll see 23% of our the actions that we've taken dealt with giving warnings in public transportation to make sure that the operators remain compliant with regards to masks and social distancing and so forth. 4% verbal warnings, and then PVs, process verbal, where fines were issued out, summons where we summons the person into the office to discuss whatever non-compliance that we found. And then let's move on to capacity building and professional development. So a budget amendment of 100,000 guilders was approved in the 22 budget for Bavpol training for about 15 FTEs, 15 employees. However, that amount was later deducted in order to comply with instructions from the CFT to reduce government expenses, unfortunately. And then the passport transport legislation. So the department did not receive any budget increases in 2021 or 2022 for the drafting of the passport transport legislation. However, that is a project the department is supporting and is working on, both the ordinance and the decree. That started in 2021. Right now, the concept legislation is has been drafted and is undergoing its first technical review and formatting. And the estimated time frame for that to be completed would be about August of this year, so in about a month and a half. After that, the technical review and formatting has been completed, then it will enter the formal legal trajectory, which is making its rounds through the organization, being vetted, of course, approved by the minister, by COM, and then moving on through the legal trajectory. So let me now give you some highlights of the draft ordinance. Let me emphasize the word draft because things can still change depending on stakeholder consultation and of course approval of the minister. The idea is to establish an independent administrative body, a ZBO. The tasks of the ZBO are mainly compliance supervision and administrative enforcement, and that would be on the basis of a non-exhaustive list of ordinances. So we have the passport transport ordinance itself, the legislation, both the ordinance and the decree. The road traffic ordinance co-enforcement there because traffic and transport are they coexist. It's traffic on the road, transport is part of traffic. Motor vehicle inspection ordinance, business license ordinance, the fees ordinance, as well as the parking tax ordinance. But bear in mind, once again, this is not an exhaustive list. Some more legislative highlights, the possibility for concession. So right now what we have for the past 51 years or so is we have private operators providing transportation over the public road. There is no public transportation per se. So a concession, and a concession can take many forms. It can be a concession of a route. It could be a concession of the entire island. It could take, concession is just a general concept. The possibility for concession is going to be introduced in law. Also defining private bus transport, because right now we define the 5 categories of public transportation, but you could have private bus transportation, you could also have public bus transportation. So that needs to be adequately defined. Digitizing permits and passes. So one of the things that we are pushing, of course, is, we're in 2022, we need to embrace technology. So we want to introduce that going green, reducing paper, to digitize as much as possible all the various elements of public transportation, including the administration of it. So yes, we will be looking at issuing you, for example, credit card size permits or a pass. So a permit holder would get a permit, and if you are a driver of a vehicle, you would get what we would call a pass, but it would be credit card size, and it'll also be represented digitally. Establishing a mandatory digital public transportation register. So officially there will be a register of all public transportation operators that can be consulted. You can go on there and look and see, okay, is the person or company that I'm dealing with, are they bona fide, are they certified, yes or no? You can go and verify on that register. What is also very interesting is the proposal to introduce a point system or sanctions. One of the main objectives of that is to introduce more objectivity and independence when it comes to sanctioning and enforcement. So some of the public may be aware, some of you may be aware, in other countries, for example, you commit a certain violation, a certain amount of points are attached to that. With that comes more transparency. So if you do X, then Y happens. And you can also manage and hopefully adapt your behavior, because you know, for example, if you get stopped and you are, God forbid, caught under the influence, for example, the amount of points that would be assessed would automatically trigger, for example, just an example, suspension of your license, for example. So that enforcement is more immediate, but it's also more transparent. Cashless passenger transport system, just like in other jurisdictions, it helps with, one, reducing traffic congestion and also safety of the operators themselves, because they need less cash. And also when you're boarding, for example, boarding a bus, getting off the bus, having to make change, all that delays the bus driver from being able to get on their way. A driving fitness test, very important. It is not a full-fledged, it's not the intention that this be another driving exam, but it is a part of a qualification criteria to ensure that persons who are going to be driving in public transportations know the rules of the road and can act responsibly on the road. A knowledge test, also very important. So we need to ensure that persons who are going to be providing passenger transport services know some specific topics, whether it's CPR, culture of the island, history, these type of things, some basic language proficiency. There's also going to be a disputes and complaints committee. So a dispute committee would deal with when a member of the public has an issue with service provided by an operator, and a complaints committee would deal when the operator themselves wants to lodge a complaint about some aspect of the system itself. As I mentioned, digital administration, so digitizing the administrative processes, issuing of a license, these type of things, expanded license categories. So, for example, I wouldn't want to call it driver's license, but a license to operate in public transportation, to operate a vehicle. There could be various categories of those licenses, depending on the size of the vehicle, depending on your age, et cetera, and then also increased liabilities. Liabilities from the standpoint of insurance that needs to be taken out for the safety of the passengers. The ordinance is over 50 years old. A lot of things have changed since then. Liabilities have increased. So the passenger liability also needs to increase to reflect larger vehicles are on the road, et cetera, et cetera. Workforce automation and digitization. That has been grouped, categorized in basically 3 areas: collect, analyze, act. So collect the data. Once we collect the data, we analyze it, and once we analyze it, then we act on it. So leading into that, a project that we've developed and launched June, actually this month, we call it Work Smart. The launch date was the 3rd of June. It's a pilot project. It's going through until the 2nd of December, and then we'll have an evaluation process. The goal is to promote, enforce data-driven management decisions. The platform that we're using is ArcGIS. We're actually very grateful to our colleague, Ministry of Romy, because they have that platform, as well as STAT, that has given us access to that platform, where we can now use web-based and tablets. When we go out, we do controls. We've digitized the forms, or at least one form that we've used, because right now it's a pilot, and everywhere that we go, we can log where we've been, and all that information is logged in real time and uploaded to government's server, and management can see what's going on almost in real time and take decisions based on that. So far it's going well, and I think it's really going to help us make better decisions, because we'll have a more and richer access to data. So these, like I said, these are the objectives of the project: digitize work carried out in the field, streamline and standardize workflows and data collection, automate workforce and task management, improve data analysis, and improve the quality and speed of decision making. So in essence, the controllers, the economic controllers right now, when they leave the office, they have a tablet, they do all their work in the tablet, they don't need to come back into the office and sit behind a computer anymore. All the work that they've done for the day, once they come in, they connect to the internet, it's uploaded, and their job is done for the day. So once again, this is a recap of what our activities are for the year, which is, as I said, enforcement against unlicensed businesses, ensuring fair competition in trade, capacity building and professional development, and last but not least, workforce automation and digitization. And with that, that brings you to the end of my presentation, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Have you shared this PowerPoint with the Parliament? Do we have it?
Yes, it's on the USB drive, but I can email it, that's no problem.
Okay. That was indeed an in-depth presentation. I will look to my left if any members of Parliament have any questions.
Yeah.
Yep. Digital world.
I use the digital one.
MP Brison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon once again, and thanks to Mr. Wilson for the very in-depth presentation. I think it gave a good idea of the activities from the department. I think that's very helpful for us to understand. It's a very big department. I believe probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest department in all of government. Am I correct? Yeah. In terms of employees, it got to be one of the biggest. How many, if I can ask, how many employees in total fall under the inspection department?
We have right now about 83. So we're the biggest in the ministry, and probably one of the biggest in the government, but not the biggest.
Yeah. So Mr. Wilson has quite a management portfolio as well, just to give some perspective there. If Mr. Chairman would be able to go back to the slide that spoke about the Bavpol, I just had a question regarding that. Right before you went into legislation, I think right before, yes. Okay, Mr. Chairman, this is my first point of concern. And Mr. Chairman, I think, of course, we're getting a technical briefing from the civil servants. What might serve a purpose is some of these questions are more geared maybe to the Minister of Finance and Minister of TEATT. So perhaps maybe by a decision list that can be sent further or by letter to the relevant minister. But this right here is very concerning. Mr. Chairman, we have a budget amendment that was passed by the Parliament of St. Maarten to include 100,000 guilders for Bavpol training for 15 full-time employed inspectors. Okay? You have seen, I think in this presentation, Mr. Chairman, the importance of the activities that the inspection is carrying out. And it's for that reason when I posed those questions during the Central Committee meeting of the budget, I asked the minister at the time, okay, what are the activities of this department? What do they need? Because that's the primary thing I think we, in a budget debate as members of Parliament, it's not just about, you know, oh, why are we doing this? But what else do you need? How can we help by means of amendment? And one of the things that was mentioned in the Central Committee was stressing on the fact that having Bavpol trained inspectors would help the department so much more in executing their tasks. Now, we've been hearing about this and received notification even via the Parliament budget that there's some order to cut 50 million guilders in the upcoming in our upcoming budget amendment. But Mr. Chairman, I think we really need to ask the Minister of TEATT as well as the Minister of Finance, did the budget 2022 that has been published, did that just expire? Is that no longer valid? Or am I missing something? Because to see that this amount was later deducted in order to comply with CFT instructions to reduce government's expenses, that is extremely concerning. Because it is the Parliament of St. Maarten that passes a budget. It is then vetted by the Ombudsman. If the Ombudsman has no objection, it goes through the ratification process, signed off by the governor, published, And then if I understand correctly, this is what the ministries then have to function based on. So I think it is definitely a big concern and something we need to address, that the ministry cannot be hamstrung by a instruction or a advice or whatever it is coming from CFT until the point it comes to Parliament. If you look at what the law states about this, it's pretty clear. Article 50 of the Accountability Ordinance, it is possible to deviate from the budget prior to the establishment of a national decree to amend the budget in the following cases: if the national interest requires this urgently, or in the case of urgent needs in the service year for which the budget was not foreseen. So my question was, maybe to Mr. Wilson, he can elaborate, is this not in the national interest? Can this be interpreted as something that's very important for the country? And in what ways would having more Bavpol training in the inspection department help a lot? The second question I would have is related to the what's happening and what's coming from public transportation. Very good to see all of those different items. One thing, I don't know if it's going to be incorporated, but definitely should have the attention, and that's parking. Or is there any plans to incorporate in sort of a concession for public transportation or anything like that to have some sort of parking authority as well? Because one thing that we underestimate is the effect that lack of parking has on the traffic in St. Maarten. I recall there was a study done, and maybe Mr. Wilson can elaborate on this aspect, where they looked at the Simpson Bay area to try to identify what the bottlenecks are that cause this crazy 5 p.m. traffic that you get. And I recall one of the things they said is that the constant in and out of people basically pulling over at any point to parking rather than in a centralized place where, let's say, 10 cars will go in at the same time, bam, 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 into a parking lot, and then traffic flows, then another 5 cars might come out if it's a stoplight or whatever, or just by organically. That in itself would do a lot for parking, for traffic. So just want to know if that falls under the auspices of the Ministry of TEATT, in particular, Mr. Wilson's department, and parking. What does he view in terms of the importance of parking in helping public transportation, traffic, etc.? Other than that, I think, yes, getting the presentation by email will help us in interpolating ministers when they come back to Parliament. And also, this information is very valuable if indeed a budget amendment is on its way to Parliament. I think this information has to be taken into account in that meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Brison. Mr. Wilson, you have any points on those? You have the floor.
Yes. Regarding the first question, yes, I think having properly trained, just in general, having properly trained employees, civil service is a prerequisite to be able to ensure that they can live up to their responsibilities, their expectations, to protect them as well so they know what their rights and obligations are towards fulfilling their job, but also towards the public. So being a department whose primary task is enforcement, it is of vital interest to us, and by extension, our ministry and the government, to ensure that our staff are properly trained. With respect to the the parking authority, so traffic, transport, as I alluded to, they go hand in hand. So I definitely think a transport authority, who, as I alluded to, there's also the parquet ballasting, which deals with issuing of parking permits and so forth, that also can fall and does fall under the auspices of our ministry or the minister. But of course, in close collaboration with VROMI and the Minister of Justice, because it all needs to be one comprehensive plan, a mobility plan, so to speak. Because one, you can't decide to put parking here, and how's that going to impact traffic? It needs to be a synchronized, comprehensive plan, basically island-wide, because ultimately it's not only about providing parking, but how is that parking also going to impact traffic flows, not only on one side of the island, but the other side of the island, depending on peak periods and so forth. So yes, I think that is also something that can be looked into. It doesn't all have to go into effect now, but the grand scope, the framework, the legal framework for it to be done, I think should be taken up in the legislation as well. Hopefully I answered the MP's questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. The next person I see on the list is MP Sarah Westcott Williams. MP Williams, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and a good afternoon to you, a good afternoon to my colleagues, a good afternoon to the representatives of the Ministry of TEATT here this afternoon, the Inspection Department, and the Tourism Bureau. Good afternoon to all tuned into this meeting as well. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for your presentation, and with some laudable goals and objectives for your department. And that brings me immediately to the following question in terms of, you have a lot of ideas with respect, firstly, let me break it down. Some legislative amendments and proposals on their way. In terms of capacity to even legislate the things that need to be legislated or regulated, how does your department stand where that is concerned? Secondly, with the many things that you have on your plate to do and intending to do, do you have a timeline of priorities in terms of some things that which things you would like to see first? You really want to go behind XYZ. Do you have that timeline? Thirdly, has there been any discussion, given this 15 FTEs budget that apparently was cut, have you had any discussions with anyone of the Ministry of Justice regarding preparations for the control when the ban on single-use plastic bags, etc., goes into effect? Do you have your ministry and the Ministry of Justice had any discussions where that is concerned? I remember Bavpolers being mentioned as, first of all, training persons to become Bavpolers and then to use these persons to assist in the matter of controlling that a ban is carried out. Another question, Mr. Chairman. There is a moratorium list published. I believe in fact, it might be on your ministry's site, but it definitely is on the government's website. What role does your department play where maintaining, controlling, etc., those different moratoriums that exist? And do you have any numbers or stats where that is concerned? Mr. Chairman, I think those elucidations, if I can receive those, would suffice. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Scott. Mr. Wilson, are you ready? You have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much for the questions. In terms of legislative capacity, at TEATT we're very much team players. So basically, I'm enforcement. The policy department handles legislation, but because with regard to public transportation, it has such a huge impact on my operations. One of the things that we did is we took up the mantle to push this forward. So in terms of legislative capacity, we have none. We outsource that. And so far we've gotten to the point, like I said, where we're at the point where we're finalizing the first technical review and reformatting. After that, it's going to start its legal trajectory. So I think the public transportation ordinance, for me, that's my first priority, because it has such an impact on my day-to-day operations. We are lacking, not we, I say, the legislation is so old, it's It doesn't have all the tools that we need to be effective. So that was one of the reasons why it's a priority for me. Everything else other than, country package comes number 2, but this is priority for my department. What is the, I think that also would address the second question in terms of timeline. August 2022 would be is our target to get this into the pipeline in terms of the legal trajectory to start this moving. How long that takes, I'm not sure, but that's what our priority is by August 2022. Have we had any discussion with the Minister of Justice, the Ministry of Justice? I was party to a discussion, if I'm not mistaken, last year, where that topic was brought up. That was with Judicial Affairs Department of the Ministry of Justice about the implementation of the plastic ban and how they saw it being implemented. And but I think as well, having these additional FTEs, these additional Bavpolers, will aid in enforcement because, a law that cannot be enforced is not effective. So, the benefits of getting the Bavpol training are multiple. It will multiply itself across the board. And in regards to the moratorium list, I know there is a list of moratoriums. I don't know how many moratoriums there are right now. What role do I play? Primarily, of course, if the person is going to do it the right way, they would apply to the minister, and then the minister will respond advising the applicant that is a moratorium. For me, it doesn't change that much because when we do a control, either you have a permit or you don't have a permit. If you don't have a permit, we have our enforcement policy that will kick in. If you have a permit, we just do our compliance controls. So it doesn't, moratorium or not, doesn't really affect our day-to-day operations. We are aware of it. Of course, part of our information campaign is we could also inform clients if they ask us, hey, what do you think, can I get a permit for X, Y, and Z? And we can tell you, well, no, there's a moratorium. You can always apply, but the answer would be, there's a moratorium. So, but operationally, it doesn't really impact us because we have our job to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. MP Westcott, you have any clarification, or I can move to the next person?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to indeed raise a matter for clarification, elucidation, and that's the one regarding the timeline question. Could that be expanded? Doesn't have to be during this meeting. I guess this is something you would have to work out in terms of your activities, the timeline, of course, but also the resources needed. So based on what you have presented to be your objectives and your vision going forward, could you give that kind of an overview? I know usually in the budget with the elucidation, we get something like that, but that is usually very, very global, and if it could be broken down in your department based on your priorities, a timeline and the resources which are necessary, because throughout, especially the budget, I have read too many departments reporting what they would like to do. So on paper, it sounds tremendous in terms of what departments want to do. But then when it comes to capacity and finances, that's where things, in essence, go broke. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Chairman, just to recap, this particular question, if it can be answered afterwards, the information can be provided by the department. That's okay with me. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott. I believe if you don't have it handy right now, you have?
Yeah, just for clarity, what we presented is what we're doing right now. So for example, the Work Smart project, that's ongoing now. So we plan to start in June. When we started in June, it's going to be done in December. So what we presented here isn't wishful thinking. It's ongoing right now, but I will still document it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. The next person I have is MP Solange Duncan. MP Duncan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to my colleagues here in Parliament. Good afternoon to the representatives of the Ministry of TEATT, and a good afternoon to the people of St. Martin tuned in. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for that extensive presentation indeed. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wilson is one of those department heads that fight the good fight. No, I've worked with him, and he has been there fighting the good fight. So I was extremely excited to see at least the progress with the ordinance, because I know, what goes into getting to that stage, and I look forward to seeing it come to fruition. I must ask through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Wilson about school busing. That is an area in which TEATT works with the Ministry of Education. It is also one of those areas in which we find ourselves 30 years of a structure that needs to change and improve, and it's definitely outdated. We're talking about our children. And we also know that we have a traffic issue, especially in St. Peter's. So I just wanted to ask Mr. Wilson for an update on school busing from TEATT's perspective, or if you can speak for it in its entirety. And that would be it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Duncan. I would like to see if Mr. Wilson has any answers to that.
Thank you very much, MP Duncan, for the words of encouragement. I cannot speak for school busing in its entirety. From a TEATT perspective, we have developed a much closer working relationship with our colleagues from the Education Department. I know that we have supported their initiatives, their endeavors to both draft and submit for decision-making a service-level agreement with the school bus operators. I'm not aware of the status of that. I know discussions were held with school bus operators themselves. So I can say that I've seen progress. I think technology as well can play a great role in addressing a lot of the issues and challenges and also opportunities that exist with regards to school busing. Like I said, we're in 2022, so a lot of things that we are, beating our head against the wall about, technology can take over a lot of these issues. Not that it can solve all of them, but data is important, which is one of the reasons why, at least from my department's perspective, we are pursuing, to collect data so we can make informed decisions. So yes, I know there was a service level agreement that was drafted. I think it was discussed with stakeholders. I could say my department, we gave our input into it, but I'm not clear on what the status of that is, because it was an initiative taken on from the Ministry of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. MP Duncan, any clarification needed? No, that's good. The next person I see is MP Rolando Brison. Mr. Brison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I did have an additional question that I missed earlier, and it has to do a bit more to do with fuel and gas from an inspection perspective. Can you update us on the activities of the department in terms of calibration, I think it's called, where we check all of the gas stations to see that the meters are correct and so on? You will note that there's a lot of new, well, let me not say new, there's been rebranding of these gas stations, and there might be new equipment. Have they been since been calibrated, and how often do you carry that out? And also in terms of cooking gas, there's an interesting situation from what I understand in St. Martin where Sol owns all of those tanks. Back in the days, you used to have the green ones and the blue ones and so on. Now there's just one company that has all of those tanks. Can I or anyone else fill those tanks? Or is it really now the ownership of Sol? I mean, but I know I leave a deposit with it. Is that me purchasing the tank? How does that work? I don't know if that's something inspection has actually looked into, or maybe that's more something for economic policy. You can let me know if that doesn't really fall under him as well. That's fine. But also, are we inspecting and calibrating those tanks? Are people getting what they pay for on cooking gas? Do we do spot checks to see that the amount of gas, when you're saying X amount of pounds, that it's fully filled? Especially considering, again, we have a new monopoly, let's call it like it is. Sol is now a monopoly in St. Martin, and I think it behooves inspection departments to double check that monopolistic practices aren't ending up affecting the consumer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Brison. Mr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Yes, calibrating we call them fuel dispensers. Locally, we just call them pumps. But that is part of our operational plan on a yearly basis. We do 3 to 4 calibrations of the various gasoline stations on a yearly basis, which includes, and we recently actually received a newer fuel calibration device, let's call it like that, courtesy of the Netherlands, our colleagues from the Ministry of Economic Development over there. So that is even more accurate than the one we had before. So we do those calibrations every 3 to 4 months, where we check all the pumps, whether it's diesel or gasoline. We check them to make sure that within the tolerance level they're giving you. If you buy $20, you're getting $20 worth of diesel or gasoline. So who owns it is not really relevant. We look at, the technical aspect of it. Is it calibrated properly? Yes or no? Because it's about fair trade. So fair trade is not only is the consumer getting what they paid for, but also the business owner isn't losing. So that's what the fairness comes in, because there are instances where you would go to a fuel dispenser and it's not calibrated properly, so it's actually giving too much gas. So we have to make sure that it's fair trade, so fair for both parties. With respect to the question on the cooking gas, that it is on our schedule to do this year. Because we recently got the new calibration tool, we were using that to go to, our priority was to deal with the gasoline stations first. We're rounding that up, I think, in the end of July, and thereafter, then we'll be taking a look at the cooking gas cylinders, because yes, you are paying for the net weight, which means the contents of the cylinder, not the cylinder itself, and that has to be verified that you're getting what you're paying for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. MP Brison, any clarification? Or thank you. The next person I have is MP George Pantaflet. MP George, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to my colleagues in the committee. The field, of course, our professionals from the Department of Economic Affairs. We thank you, Mr. Wilson, for the excellent presentation. I was smiling when my colleague, MP Brison, mentioned the issue of the cylinders and so on, because many years ago, Island Council days, I had asked a question in regards to, at a time I call it a measuring tank. I didn't know what the proper name for it was. To find out that it's not being done, I think about 5 years had passed and it had not been done. So I'm very happy to hear that it's being done every 3 months in order to ensure that the consumer is not being robbed. You mentioned to protect the supply, but I think mostly to protect the consumer. I think suppliers are very careful when it comes to those things, for sure. You mentioned in your presentation ensuring fair competition in trade and so on. I didn't get exactly what kind of unfair trade or competition are you referring to, because I'm thinking more of maybe you're referring to persons who has a license in comparison to those who don't have, but you can explain that to me for sure. That's one. Also, and the controls, do the controls look to see exactly not only if they have a license to operate, but do they ensure that the license that they have specifies, or are they in compliance with what is specified in the license itself? For instance, you have a license to sell, let's say, clothing, and then you're selling alcohol, and you're selling, different products. So they're making sure that the license specifies or they are selling exactly what's specified in the license. The other issue is the what are the bottlenecks? Because we know the old complaint, and it's nothing new of the processing of business licenses as to the time period. What are the bottlenecks you believe that your department is facing in order to ensure that these come out? What am I looking for? Not speedily, but in a time that would allow the person who is requesting it. Because fact is, I've known of persons or heard complaints of persons who have requested their licenses. Unfortunately, they had to go and get a location first before they can get the license, and then they're in some cases paying rent, and then 4 or 5 months they're still waiting on the license, and then their money's gone on the drain, and then sometimes they end up just canceling because the fact is their finances have been exhausted. So what are the bottlenecks that are being faced by the department in order to expedite the licenses in a faster manner? I like when you mentioned also, Mr. Chairman, through you, the issue of the private persons who are supplying public transportation, because there's no national ordinance. I'm glad you're working on that now to ensure we get that in place. The issue of the Bavpol was already handled. Just to get back a bit on the calibration machine you mentioned, the calibration device, and again, I am not ignorant of the fact that the department that you're managing, for me, I believe that it requires more staff. Digitalization is important. We are in modern technology. But again, there's a lot of work to be done because, I'm sure when someone was going to the supermarkets, I realized that the cheese is getting much lighter. The slices are very thin. So, when you weigh them now, exactly, I say, am I paying for the entire package itself, or am I paying for the cheese separately? Because sometimes you might see maybe, let me use a figure, 10 grams, but then at the same time the cheese is maybe 5 grams, but you're paying 10 grams of cheese, which you're not getting. So, those are things I believe that has to be also checked. And again, I know for a fact it is not easy, but unfortunately you cannot depend on some suppliers really, especially during these days that things are very expensive. They're trying to kind of cut back, and then the weight falls on the customer. Capacity building. How should I pose this question? They say it's better to buy gasoline in gallons than in dollars, which I try my best to do. And the other day, I didn't have any gallons. I bought $30 gasoline, and I looked at the liters, but I didn't pay attention to that too much, at the amount. So I paid $30, but the price that came out in gallons was 51 gallons and cents. And I'm saying, so what is it? Is it 175 or 176? What is it? You see, what is it that they can charge us by law? So I was very curious about that. So what is the legal price? And is it 175? Is it 176? What is it? Because for me, that's very important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George. Mr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the questions. With regards to the first question, what do you mean by unfair competition, if I understood the question correctly? You alluded to that. That's what I meant in terms of licensed businesses versus unlicensed businesses. So someone establishes a business, they don't have a license. You have another person who's invested time, money, paying taxes. That's unfair competition. And in terms of the compliance checks, yes. So when we mention compliance, we're talking in totality. So yes, do you have a business license? Great. We check the dual. So the purpose. So if you are a barber shop, then when we go there, we shouldn't see you repairing cars, for example. You're operating outside your dual, that's not permitted if you want to do something like that. And of course, your purpose should also, in general, align with the business category you're in. So, for example, cutting hair and fixing cars don't really match. So compliance, we mean compliance in general. So we start from, do you have a business license? And then we will go detail to your business license. Are you operating according to your purpose, even your address? Because you can have a business license, but you are operating from a completely different address. That has to be addressed. You have to correct that. what are the bottlenecks that your department is facing with. So my department, our primary job is compliance, so inspection enforcement. We don't process or issue business licenses. That's my colleague, Department of Economic Licenses. But of course, we're out on the road. We see part of our responsibility is also to test policy to see what's working and what's not working. So as much as possible, we would also provide our recommendations on what we see are bottlenecks, maybe policy that, you know, maybe is outdated or just doesn't make sense based on what we're seeing. But yeah, processing of business license, that doesn't fall within my competence. What about capacity? Yes. One of the things about, which I've seen just in the 2-3 weeks that we've launched is, the more information you have, the more accurate information you have, the better decisions you can make. So in terms of capacity, what we want to do is to collect that information, analyze, and then act. Let's get the information, let's have access to it, and then we can, one of the outcomes of that is to make better decisions so that we can maybe repurpose capacity into one area. So for example, if we see a lot of violations happening in a specific district, a specific type of violation at a specific time, then I can say, hey, you guys, you're gonna focus over here at this specific time. The rest of the time, go do something else. So having that information is gonna help us work smarter, not harder, which will help to alleviate some of the capacity issue. The legal exchange rate, I believe the Minister of Finance issued a press release, I'm not sure, a week or so ago, but that also doesn't fall within my competence. We will come and check that the fuel dispensers are calibrated. So if you buy 20 guilders and it's 2 guilders a liter, you're getting your 10 liters. The exchange rate, that falls outside of our competence. And I believe that was the last question for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. MP George, any clarification needed? No. The next person I have is MP Sarah Westcott. MP Westcott, you have the floor.
Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman, and a brief follow-up. Mr. Wilson, still sticking on the screen that is up, was that the only part of your budget that was cut on recommendation of the CFT's reduction or proposed reduction to the budget? And the budget was passed sometime before it went through what it had to go through, and then CFT has, according to the Kingdom Law CFT, has to also react to a budget passed by Parliament. And it's in that reaction that this proposal for a huge cut to the budget 2022 was made. So 2 questions where that is concerned. One, is that the only part of your budget that has been cut? If so, what? If not, then what else has been cut? And did you start anything regarding the training, even collect information and anything? Did you start anything once you learned of the approval in the budget before it was suggested to be slashed? Because it can only have been suggested to be slashed because that amended budget still has to be either passed or not by Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Westcott. Mr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you for the follow-up questions. Yes, that was the only part of my budget that was cut. It's not too big to begin with, so I noticed it. And the next question, yes, we had started preparations. So we knew, it's 15 FTEs because those were persons we specifically chose based on the length of time they've been in the department, and without that training. We had discussions with colleague ministries. I know there's several ministries actually that were scheduled to take part in this training. So we were just basically waiting on the money so we could start. So without this money, we're kind of, stuck.
And Mr. Chairman, if I just may, one.
Yes.
And that particular cut was done without any consultation, without any feedback with your department? Even a question in terms of, suppose you had started to enter into contracts or something of the sort because there was an approved budget. So actually, my question is, did without any contact, that particular post was cut from your department, or was there contact? Is my question. Thank you, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Wilson.
No, we were, well, a general, notification went out that this was a recommendation, instruction. I'm not sure how exactly these cuts had to be made, and then I motivated the reason why, this money is needed. But yeah, the cuts were still made. So that's all the information I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Anyone else? No more. MP Brownville, you have the floor.
Good afternoon to you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to my colleagues. Good afternoon to the Maarten Tourist Bureau, radio listeners, viewers, and social media viewers. Mr. Chairman, I would like to add 3 questions that I kind of was querying about. So my questions are, if someone puts in for a license and there's a moratorium on this license, if it is lifted in the future, will the license be processed, or you will have to reapply for that license again? And also, I've been speaking with a few tourists on the island, and they find the access to the beaches are very, the roads are very rough and bad and stuff like that. So I don't know if this falls under your jurisdiction, as in repairing the roads to the access to the beach, or this is a farming situation. And also, my last question would be, there are a lot of tourists come to the island, and their mind thinks dollars, so they pay everything in dollars, so they make a lot of mistakes. They go to the gas station, or they go to the supermarkets, and you see the price, but it's not as clear as it should be, so they make a lot of mistakes and overspend on dollars. So I want to know if there's an awareness for this, or is any promotion for this to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Brownville. Mr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Yes. So with regards to application for business licenses, that's not my competence. I'm enforcement. But in general, when you apply for business license, the moratorium, of course, the government always has to respond to your request in a timely manner. So they will respond and, of course, advise you that there's a moratorium, so therefore your request is denied. So therefore you got your response. When the moratorium is lifted, then I would assume then you would have to reapply, because the request you received a response to your request already, so you would have to submit a new application. I don't think it works where you would submit it and then it sits there until the moratorium is lifted. Government will respond. And then if you're still interested, because that's the other flip side of the coin, if they held it, they would still have to contact you. We don't know if you're still interested. So I think it needs to be a closed loop. You request something, you get a response. If the situation changes, then you would request again. The second question about beach access, I know it's definitely not me. I think beach access would probably fall under Vromi being public domain, but I'm not sure. But it would definitely not fall under the inspection of TEATT. And then the next question about the prices at the gasoline station. So prices should be visible, unambiguous. That is something that my department does check on to make sure that goods and services in stores that they're priced and the price indication. I will definitely have my controllers follow up on that, but also the public. I know with tourists it could be a bit difficult because they're only here for a period of time, but in general, if they come across issues like that, they can email TEATT complaints at stmartingov.org, and we will respond and deal with it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Oh, let's see, the next person on the list is MP Angelique Rumo. MP Rumo, you have the floor.
Pleasant good afternoon to you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little bit hoarse, I'm a bit under the weather, so, and pleasant good afternoon to my colleagues, also to the representatives here today for TEATT. My question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Wilson, but I think he semi-answered it already because you said you are in compliance. So my question would have been in terms of, and my colleague touched on the access and the permission in terms of what is allowed on the beaches. So your task is basically to police, so to speak, that the persons who are operating on the beaches, for example, do have the correct licenses. So it wouldn't be that, for example, someone puts in for a permit and, because we talked about moratoriums, and the moratorium is there, but was still issued a permit. How would your department deal with that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Rumo. Mr. Wilson, you have the floor.
I'd just like to make sure I understand the question. Was the question if there's a moratorium and the person requests a license and they get the license, how would we deal with it? That was the question? Okay, so for us, doesn't change. We're checking if you have a license or you don't have a license. So a controller goes out on the beach. They're gonna check to make sure that you have a license and you're operating within the dual of your license. Because when we see the license, there's no history to it. It's the document and what you're allowed to do, and that's what we're enforcing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. MP Rumo, does that need any clarification? MP Brownbill, you needed any clarification? Yeah, you have the floor.
So just to clarify, two points. So with the moratorium, right? Even though it's not really under you guys, but so if like somebody applies and a year later it opens, they have to reapply? That's for clarification, right? Yeah. Why I ask, because if suppose it opens next year and you only could get 10 more, that means that person lose out who applied first. So then you can actually like give it to who you want to. So that was the point. That's point number one. Point number two, the marketing aspect of the Maarten Tourist Bureau, I find that it should deal with the access to the beaches, because I don't, as
The next
from,
agenda point.
so, oh, that's the next one?
Yeah, that's the tourist office.
Okay, I'll hold that one for the next one, okay? Thank you. All right.
Thank you, MP Brownbill. Mr. Wilson, you have the answer.
Yes. So for the sake of clarity, I will say this. We deal with enforcement. So we're looking at, do you have a license? Do you not have a license? And are you operating according to the purpose in your license? More than that, I can't elucidate more than that.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. The next person I see is MP George. MP George, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a matter of probably for the public's information. I believe during presentation you mentioned the issue of a complaint committee that has to be established, or is it already established? And if that's the case, because I'm going back to the issue of people have to eat. So markets, somebody go into them and there's only one price or one currency. And isn't there a law that it is compulsory that they have both the US and the Antillean Guild? Or is it so that the Guild must be put on the goods, not necessarily the dollar, because even though yes we use U.S. dollars and so on predominantly, we also have our Gila is our official currency. Let's put it this way. Is there a law that says that they have to put both currencies, dollars and Gilas, but definitely they have to make sure that they have price on the goods, because I've gone into many establishments where there are no prices, not even on the shelves. And when you get to the cashier, you have to find exactly what the prices are. I'm talking from experience, not hearsay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George. Mr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Two things. With the reference to the complaints committee, that was with respect to the passenger transport legislation. So under that legislation, it is recommended that they have a disputes committee and a complaints committee to deal with matters related to passenger transport. With respect to the display of prices and whether it's guilders or dollars, that's a more legal question. So I would reserve answering that. I would have to get with my colleagues and then, if possible, provide you an answer in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any more clarification, MP George?
No, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
The next person I see is MP Westcott. MP Westcott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's more a suggestion to you as chairperson of this committee to, as part of the report of this committee, to ask the Minister of TEATT, if we can be provided with an update on the issues of the moratoriums. This is an old list. It is there on government's website. And during the budget debate, I believe it was, I asked regarding that listing, but the answer was very brief and not very clear in terms of where we stand. So if that can be part of this report, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Westcott. I don't see any more MPs have any questions, so this brings to the end of agenda point 1, which was agenda point 2 previously. And if you want to give any closing remarks, Mr. Wilson.
I think I would just like to say once again, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and respond to the questions of the members of Parliament, and also to inform the public in general. I gathered that the presentation, the information presented was clear, which was the intention, and that moving forward, my department will continue to promote, customer service as well as fair trade in the market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. To clarify now, you have a couple of things. You have to send the presentation to the Parliament, and I believe Parliament is going to make a synopsis of the meeting of today and send it to the government. And according to this, we close the agenda point 1, and I'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. Meeting adjourned. Good afternoon and welcome back. We go over to the agenda point 2, which was rectified as the agenda point 1. Presentation by St. Maarten Tourist Bureau on an overview of their marketing and product development plans, including the use of increased funds provided by the 2021 and 22 budget amendments. In the same letter, MP Brison also requested that a meeting of TEATT committee be convened to discuss the above-mentioned agenda point. At this time, I would like to first give the floor to the requester of this meeting, MP Brison, to elucidate his request on the agenda point 2.
Thank
MP
you.
Brison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not much of elucidation needed. I think the first agenda point kind of highlighted the idea behind it. Let's hear from the department what the activities are, what the activities that have been done, what are the plans, and what are the challenges they may face. I think we've seen in the first agenda point one challenge from a budgetary nature. Would be good to see if we get some indications on that from Tourist Bureau as well. And also maybe in terms of the bureaucracy and the process, having sat in that very difficult seat, as my colleague stated, fighting the good fight. It is not easy when you're in the Ministry of TEATT in particular, where you shoulder the load of the economy, you have great ideas and things you want to pursue, and somehow, let's just say there are bottlenecks on the road along success. So with that, that's my elucidation, and I look forward to the presentation, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling the meeting.
Thank you, MP Brison. I would like now to give the floor to the civil servants, Ms. Arundel, Ms. Chun, and Ms. Franken. Welcome, and who should I give the floor to?
To me.
Ms.
Sure.
Chun, you have the
MP.
floor.
Hi, good afternoon, members of Parliament, listeners and viewers. Thank you for this opportunity. And thank you to the TEATT committee, MP Brison as well, for requesting our presence here today to give you a little synopsis on what is going on in our tourism industry. First, before I start, I would like to introduce the Tourism Bureau section heads, which is on my right is Gianira Arundel, who is the section head for marketing. She's responsible for all the marketing for the island, for the destination, which we have basically divided in, of course, different regions, such as USA, Canada, the Caribbean, South America, and Europe. She's responsible to oversee the market research researcher or the market research person, including as well some promotional assistant that assists basically all these actions and objectives we have. Sorry, I'm a little cold, so I'm still, I'm warming up. As well as on my left, we have section head for product development, which is Sharina Franken, who's responsible for all the various product development activities that varies between beautification, environmental, education, cultural events or projects, as well as special events. These two departments do synchronize and work together as we are all hands on deck, because our organizational structure, which is now outdated in the times where we are innovating, trying to be innovative, we have in total in our organizational structure 22 team members, of which that means that in these days, for various responsibilities we have, such as even developing Airline or working on certain environmental projects, you need specific persons, including, for example, even your in-house graphic designing. I'm mentioning just a few of things that have persons that handle cruise and yachting. So basically right now, everybody is doing what we call multitasking. And they do it with pleasure, by the way, but it does get stretched and challenged. Tourism product development, improved data collection, and marketing and promotion are needed for further tourism recovery and revenue generation. As arrival and accommodation capacity increase, Resources are needed to continue to boost tourist arrivals, provide a competitive tourism product, and maximize revenue generation opportunities. Cleanup efforts are needed for beautification, lighting, and general redevelopment of St. Martin's core tourism products, such as downtown Phillipsburg and other nature and heritage attraction sites. Given the competitive regional and global tourism market, significant marketing and promotion efforts are needed to effectively promote the islands to tourists, develop new charters and airline arrivals, and engage with social media and marketing platforms. Public and private investment in product development and quality along these lines can attract higher spending visitors and strengthen linkages and economic opportunities for local businesses working in the tourism ecosystem. These businesses also require support to provide competitive tourism services that meet the high-quality standards of the evolving and highly competitive Caribbean tourism market. Public-private coordination efforts and more effective institutional support for the tourism sector are needed to encourage the development of higher-value tourism products. Investments in these tourism development efforts will enable St. Martin to reestablish and improve its competitive position, extend the tourism season, and mitigate seasonality of arrivals, generate additional revenue opportunities for domestic businesses, and increase the economic and environmental resilience of the tourism sector and economy. The extreme uncertainty surrounding the tourism recovery in the Caribbean highlights the importance of boosting innovation and supporting transformations that align tourism destinations and products with post-pandemic global demand trends, according to a report, and this is according to a report of the Inter-American Development Bank. A regional overview analyzes key drivers of tourism demand in the short term, including the evolution of the pandemic and the COVID-19 vaccination rollout, the economic environment of source countries, the split between business versus leisure tourism, airline capacity, among others. We have to be on top of all these ever-evolving trends. St. Martin as a destination needs to invest in improving her competitiveness, aligning her tourism products to the broader local and global economic trends, and exploring new ones. With the international firms of Big IDs that does our digital marketing, USP PR and Marketing Communications firm, and Diamond PR and Marketing and Communications firm, they've been on board since 2020. St. Martin saw immediate increase in bookings to the island as aggressive business-to-consumer campaigns were executed to increase the destination's awareness and increase, therefore, bookings. We also work with local content creators to develop graphic designers, content writing, videography, social media, as this goes hand in hand with our international firms that have to, of course, highlight the best possible experience and product of our destination. Now, we closed 2021 once again with an upward trend, and showing this infographic just to highlight a few things. Our stayovers were, compared to 2020, we're up with close to over 248,000 stayover visitors, which is 78% recovery of, if we take 2019 as our point of interest. The increase was tremendous, of course, because 2021 was a year that we did a lot of activities. Looking also at stayover arrivals, you can see here that North America is still 68% of our business, but there is an increase in Europe, 26%. We see again the interest increasing in Germany, the UK, as well as Italy. Latin America was low. As we know, that is also because they were the last to reopen, but we do see the interest now again. The consumers that want to travel will travel, and it's a more higher spending target market. And the rest of the world showing that at 3.5. The average night was tremendous. This is an overall average night basically across the regions. They were varying from 6 nights all the way up to 20 nights, depending on which region they were coming from. So the average overall is 8 nights, which is pretty impressive during this time. Total arrivals between cruise and stayover was 481,000 and change. With home porting, of course, that made a lot of difference for us in 2021, where we saw home porting passengers and the growth. Again, compared to 2020 with 185 port calls, and 28% of those home porting were staying in hotels pre and post tours. Looking, which I think is very impressive, is the 2022. We were in an upward trend again as we continued our marketing that we were able to execute. This is the outcome of all the work that was done in 2021 as well. So for quarter one, which is January, February, March, that is 101, close to 102,000. You can see here compared to 2021, it was 194% increase, and versus 2019, it was 19%. Airport arrivals were up with 227%, and 99.7% of recovery. The occupancy level was, in our first quarter, 71%. This was based on a sample taken of 2,556 room unit samples. Stayovers here, you'll see also again North America still being the #1 market, between United States being the most, but Canada on the increase. Europe 28.8, and Caribbean and Latin America lagging behind. Home porting here, same thing. The first quarter alone was showing 207 port calls, which is 78% of the recovery of 2019. And we had home port passengers over 18,000. Okay, just to give you a little idea also on the different activities we had. One of them that was very effective, which was our business to consumer campaign, was the Expedia campaign. We invested since November of 2021, and that campaign ran till February, if I'm correct. February of 2022, we invested $25,000 in a matching co-op campaign that basically we saw close to $1.8 million in room bookings. That tells you the reason why I'm mentioning, and it's 25,000 might not sound a lot, but imagine if we invest more, what this platform can do for us. It has been successful. It is showing that it's driven that, you know, on bookings and results. And this is something that is a public-private partnership. When usually we are doing campaigns, the private sector does as well. Maybe just recently you heard also, because we had some challenges where our numbers are down for the summer. So the private sector and public sector came together, and the private sector had raised also funds. So we're doing actually a new campaign that's going to be close to about $90,000 in total, $90,000 in total between public and private sector. We put another 25, whereby, and the private sector accumulated almost close to $70,000, where the campaign will run from, let's say, end of June till fall. Having said that, the big objective is that we realize that this platform is very effective for St. Maarten. It shows results. So we actually have a long-term 10-month campaign that's going to run from this year into next year with Expedia that will target different regions that we actually market to, which is the US, Canada, and Europe as well. So looking at our priorities for tourism development in 2022 to 24 is, of course, continue to increase our tourism arrivals and cruise and stayovers, develop year-round tourism through diversification and niche markets, maintain a year-round calendar of tourism events, improve product and service, and basically here we dissected it in KYC, know your customer. So geographic areas continue to be our 5 areas of the USA, Canada, Europe, being Benelux, UK, Scandinavia, Caribbean region, as well as South America. A very interesting thing that even though, as we said, trends are changing, Scandinavia might not be the priority right now as we see an increase in Germany and the UK. Scandinavia right now is a challenge, which we feel then we need to wait with that. And see how it's continued to develop if the interest is there for the Caribbean. Our niche markets we're definitely concentrating on this year is the mice market. I mentioned that as first because mice, this is not in any type, shape, or form in order of priority, but mice market is something that we've been concentrating and see the demand for St. Martin because of its logistics, because of how we are able to cater to the different groups. Let me explain. Mice market, that stands for meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition. This is over a $6 billion market, and that is something that St. Martin definitely taps in with our larger property, especially Sonesta Group that caters to a lot of the MICE sector, as well as Simpson Bay Resort that have smaller meeting rooms but caters to that as well, and a couple of others. And of course, on the French side, we have Secrets. But what this has done is we see the increase in interest and demand. So we are concentrating on attending the shows, but partnering up with our private sector as well to showcase and sell the destination. Because this is a higher yield, they spend more money, and even though it's only, usually 3 to 5 nights, it is a high spending market. Of course, culinary is for this year also very important for us. Culture and creativity, that's an increase. We've been really working collaboratively with my colleague Clara Reyes from Head of Culture. So with her department and our department, we basically try to showcase as much as possible in the culture and creative tourism, as we see that now when people visit, they want to know what the island is about. They want to experience how people live. They want to experience and know the history and the culture. So we are making opportunities, creating opportunities to ensure that the tourists can immerse in those experiences. And of course, the luxury. We had a Villa Vibe campaign last year, which we want to continue again as soon as our firms are back on board. We're finalizing their agreements, their advices. So basically between Big Ideas, the PR firm from Europe and the PR firm for North America, we're going to start back up with the Villa Vibe campaign because we do see also an interest in there, and it's a higher disposable income. And weddings. The demographics, as you can see here, the usual timeshare repeat guests, because they are our repeat guests that consistently return, but they also ask for new things to do. So that is where it comes in, where our product development has to go into, new experiences, new excursions, but also, I believe, in, explaining or giving them more access to also the historical experiences. The affluent segment, that is what I was discussing before, the ones with more, the more higher disposable income, and the middle verb, what we call the Gen X. The lifestyle is loyal repeat visitors, special events. As you can see this year, we had a lot of special events again. I will go over some of the activities we had that we have done since the first 6 months of this year. The island hopping is still a very much interest for tourists when they come. Voluntourism and food travelers. Of course, continue with our cruise and yachting industry, with home porting cruise conversion, continue beautification in Phillipsburg, because we got to create, a better experience for all our tourists, for that matter. We're busy also with finalizing the kiosk, which is basically like we're going to have the smart city, and we're almost done with that. The kiosk whereby they basically can digitally locate all the special attractions and places to go. And of course, trade shows in collaboration with the port. So diversification is going to come through, like I said before, the creative industry, the MICE market. This is something we want to do to create all year round. We don't want to talk anymore about season. I think we think we have the opportunity to create year-round business, and that is our objective. Every month, making sure there is some type of activity or project that attracts tourists to the island, whether it's, from various regions. And that's our main objective. And you can do that if we continue being committed, to also the yearly increase that you need in the tourism sector as far as budget in order for us to execute these projects. So for summer off-season, we want to concentrate on the sporting events and staycation, and the tourism appreciation and culinary March, September, November. Those are the sectors we want to tackle. Everybody saw that this year we had tons of events. I call them tons of events, but we had quite a few with Heineken Regatta, St. Maarten Festival, and Carnival in the first quarter and beginning of second quarter. So some of the activities from January till June. So we have, of course, we're going to continue with our FCCA Platinum, whereby we're going to continue marketing and having built that relationship with the FCCA, and market also from a destination perspective in order for us to improve the experience of the one-day tourist that comes and visits. International Media Marketplace is an event we held where it was intense one-on-one meetings with journalists, literally to entice them to come and write about St. Maarten. So out of that marketplace, I think we saw 50 journalists, of which 10 were scheduled. Some came already, and others are still have to come this year or next year. The Multi-Hall Challenge, we supported it in February. Of course, the two events that I just previously mentioned. Here you see a range of activities we had in April as well. We had some airline campaigns there with Sunwing and American Airlines and Sea-Trade. The May activities being that the launch of the ambassador program is not happening, that's delayed. We're going to probably be able to launch that sometime in July. But we had Memorial Day weekend alone. We had 3 special events this year, which attracted also numerous arrivals, visits, and bookings to the island. Now, I'm speaking about all of these events that create, of course, increase in arrivals, but the beauty of it is it would be nice if we have the data collecting that we discussed before. In the beginning, I mentioned it, and it's already in the last few years, we've been discussing data collecting. It is absolute still a priority for us to see data collecting system put in place, because without your data, you are basically still basing your results on the various areas that you collect numbers of, whether it's from the hotel occupancy, whether it's from tourist arrivals at the airport, whether it's the stakeholders, partners telling you how their business increased. But what we really need is an online embarkation, disembarkation system whereby we basically have control, where we can see exactly who is coming, where they're going, what is their purpose. And that is still our goal, to establish that, work on it still starting this year, but hopefully can establish that next year. And some of the other June activities. Let me leave it there. So we're speaking about some challenges because, of course, this doesn't come without the challenges we have, as the tourism department is in a very bureaucratic system. It's a process that's long, and we all know that it's a process that negatively affects us, because tourism marketing or tourism development is all about opportunity, but it's also, especially in these times of post-pandemic, opportunities come along where you have to make quick decisions. And it has proven already that tourist offices or tourism entities that have put themselves in a semi or privatized structure, whether it's an independent administrative structure, ZBO, or STA as we know it, or as most of them call it now themselves, is a destination management organization. You have to be able to effectively, efficiently execute these projects. I feel that is something that we hope to see being prioritized that we can move forward with. It is on the agenda to basically finalize the research or basically the best practices and for us to move forward with this as well. Just to give you an idea, islands that have privatized, from Antigua to Puerto Rico, St. Lucia, Grenada, St. Kitts, Nevis, Dominica, to name a few, all are, in a type of DMO structure. For 2022, we also received an increase of 7 million guilders, of which both ladies on my either side of me, Sharina and Gia, have put a year plan together based on objectives we had, based on diversification, based on how can we get, higher tourism receipt and more arrivals. We worked on a plan. We also, just like control and inspection, received cuts, received the message that we do have to cut as well. And so some of these projects are now put on the back burner because we are not able to execute them this year. Some of them are, for example, in product development, beautification of Philipsburg. We were going to, together with the different stakeholders in Philipsburg, do different signs, beautification, in order to make a more pleasant experience for our tourists. To agritourism, working with the local entities that are able to attract stayovers and cruise passengers to come visit their locations. Standardizing the quality of different businesses, so like restaurants and hotel ratings we were going to do this year. Training as well, and the yachting industry will have to maneuver. We were going to look into doing more marketing destination as a destination, not only as a yachting industry, but more as a destination market in the yachting industry. So we'll have to see how we're going to be maneuvering those projects and prioritize to see what we will be able to accomplish. And the film activities we had, so let's call it film tourism, whereby we started doing site inspection and attracting different companies that wanted to start coming here to film different series or films or videos. So with that said, also comes that we are busy writing, with assistance from assistance of the Economic Affairs Department, assisting us in writing a policy for the film industry. And then in marketing, of course, we had some cuts there as well, so we have to see now what we're going to prioritize and what we will leave for the next year coming. And that's basically, in a nutshell, I made a synopsis, otherwise we were going to be here the whole evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chun. Before I move to my left to the MPs, I would like to get some clarification. First thing, the stats what you showed, does that include the Airbnb arrivals too?
These stats?
Yeah.
Yes, it does include Airbnb arrivals.
Second thing is you made a synopsis of where the cuts were. You made
Yes,
a
sorry,
synopsis
let me
of where
repeat
the-
myself again. It
You
does
made a
include.
synopsis of where the cuts were imposed on you for this budget.
Mm-hmm.
Could you be specific with the amounts, like how the Mr. Wilson gave us?
Okay, no, the cuts were general, so we were told we had to cut with 3.9 million. I think I forgot to mention that. And then what happens is we were asked to see where, and that is where then we decided collaboratively where these cuts have to be. So the things I mentioned now would have been, for example, advices that have to be made in order for us to execute them this year. But we have to hold off now and see what we will do this year or leave it for next year.
Could that be
Is that-
shared with the Parliament?
What we are deciding on to prioritize. Once we finalize that, and we
After that.
discuss it with the minister, we can share how we will revise our execution plan. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Looking to my left, I see MP Brison. MP Brison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and once again, good afternoon, and a special thanks to Ms. Mei Ling Chun and her team for a great presentation. I think it summarized pretty well where we were, what is being done, and some of the challenges being faced. Mr. Chairman, before going into the questions, I again, just maybe more for the edification of my colleagues here in this committee, I really want to highlight what the issues in our system where we are, how it can ultimately affect even something like the marketing of tourism. The Parliament passed a budget, okay? We pass a budget, we work on it. Some people may vote against or not, but that doesn't really matter. In the end, in terms of, okay, there is a budget that all of us in Parliament now are going to respect. The budget is published and it goes for the government to then execute. Imagine now a CFT sends advice to our government and says, hey, good job performing better than expected. Good job with the marketing you've done, and good job breaking every single indicator that we were supposed to do X, and we did X times 20%, plus 20%. And instead of saying, good job, reinvest that, do more marketing, what our government is apparently being told is, no, since you did better than expected, you don't need as much money, cut. I mean, this is such a situation that maybe I'm going to go a very off if I have to say, you see what could happen with Akoho? This is not the way I think our democracy should work. If the Parliament passes a budget, and I can't really look at any other entity than the CFT and ask, do you not take into account this type of effect that you have? Where you just unilaterally say 50 million. Where 50 million come from? I don't know. I guess we'll find out from the Minister of Finance and the CFT. But my position, and why I want to start by saying this, is that to me, the absolute last budget item, if cuts are necessary, that you cut, is your tourism marketing budget in a country where you depend 90% of your GDP, of your taxes, of your income is derived from tourism. I understand the need to make cuts and adjustments here or there. There's certain other projects you might have in any other ministry, or even within the Ministry of TEATT, you might say, hey, if there's something we want to do with transportation or this or that, you can tell yourself, okay, let's see if we can fit that into next year. But marketing the country, developing your tourism product should be the absolute last thing cut. So similarly to the first agenda point, Mr. Chairman, I would like for the committee to start by, or include questions to the Minister of Finance elucidating the reasoning behind cuts to the Ministry of TEATT. Is there other options that we can look at instead? But particularly the Tourism Bureau. Mr. Chairman, in 2021, the Parliament approved a budget amendment that was presented by my person that brought an increase in the amount of 3.2 million guilders to the tourism budget. And what was the logic behind that at the time? The Dutch government was providing money for SSRP. And my argument was, no, let's take just 5%, I believe was the number I came up with, of what you would pay out in SSRP, and instead invest it in tourism marketing. And then as a result, you have a better economy and we need to depend less on SSRP. Mr. Chairman, I can't say that it's because of that we took on much, much, much less SSRP, much less liquidity support than expected. But what we do know is St. Maarten, based on every indicator we've seen, if you take this chart in front of us right now and you go back in time to 2020, CFT would have told you, no way you would have gotten 366,000 arrivals in 2021. No, that's impossible. But we did it because we have a very resilient economy. We're doing our best with tourism marketing, and the private sector as well came together and say, you know what, whether government is doing it or not, we're going to find ways to push. So it's very unfortunate to hear that there might be some cuts coming, and I mean, Again, how is it that unilaterally cuts can be made? I think what a government can do is say, well, let's pause payments on this and so on. But I don't think budget cuts can be done without a budget amendment. So that's something that we definitely have to investigate. I wanted to get specifically in that budget amendment when we increased the co-op campaigns for 500,000 guilders, Expedia marketing campaign by 500,000 guilders. Those two particular points I did hear and see in the media of some other co-op campaign in smaller amounts. But where are we with actually going all out with co-op marketing campaign and with Expedia? Is it because of this issue where we're told, no, hold on, because budget cuts are coming? Why, let's say, an advice from Expedia or advice for marketing campaigns are not being executed and we're just doing, let's say, 25,000 guilders here, 40,000 guilders here? I would like to hear from the department if they can share with us that process. Where are we with the full-blown Expedia campaign? Can you share with us maybe some estimates, or maybe probably not numbers, I know that's tough, but give an idea to what Expedia marketing means, dollars and cents, what the potential is if we were to live up to this budget amendment, what it would do for the returns in the country, specifically Expedia, and if you can get some examples of some of the co-op marketing campaigns with airlines and how that also functions. We know that we had one with Copa. Copa recently started flying again. Do we plan to maybe start doing the co-op marketing campaigns with Copa? I believe those were very successful in the past. But any others as well? I think Sunwing was also one that was very successful in terms of the return on investment. We saw the flights, I think, at one point in previous campaigns went from 2 flights a week to 6 flights a week. I mean, that is an incredible, very tangible effect that you see what you get from a co-op marketing campaign. Other than that, in terms of the tourist department, it's in the Tourism Bureau itself, the department, in terms of your FTEs and your fulfillment of the different positions, where are you there? I think you mentioned 22. Where are you there, and what are the plans and efforts to actually have you functioning at 100% capacity within your department? Mr. Chairman, I won't, I'll mention that part of the issue, and it's not something for the Tourist Bureau or lack of their effort, I'm sure, but one of the issues that also needs to be brought to the attention of the Minister of TEATT is, how do I put this? The way we take care of our staff within that department in terms of what they should be paid. I came in at that point and I saw a situation where you had people on Anlope scale, this 2-year, 2 scales below thing for years. And I'm hoping that the department is not facing that again, where you're trying to recruit people, but then you're told the law says the position is, or the policy says the position is scale 12, but we're going to start you at 10. Why? Because PNO says so. That I hope that's not something that we're facing still, and that can be something of the past, because Parliament did pass a motion asking the Prime Minister to really kind of deal with this whole Anlope scale situation that our departments are facing. That'll be all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Brison. I would like to set a format. Would you like to answer right away, or you want all the MPs to pose their questions and then you will answer?
I would like to answer right away.
Okay. So
I would like to answer right away.
Ms. Chun, you have the floor.
Thank you. On the subject of the large Expedia campaign, which was a new 2022 budget specifically for Expedia, that is in process. That is actually at its final stages. So we hope to be able, by say mid-July, able to be speaking to Expedia about the strategy and the plan itself. So that is something forthcoming pretty soon. As far as the airline, because we also established an airline development budget, which is something also we're working on right now. That has not started yet, because with so much going on and all the activities we needed to do, this is something we're working on now, whereby we're going to use the airline development budgets for various airlines, such as JetBlue, Delta, KLM, Sunwing to basically start doing the cooperative marketing again to increase their destination awareness as well as bookings. The Sunwing, to reiterate, that is correct. Sunwing had a successful marketing campaign that started December of 2021 into 2022. So that showcased that, and also the bookings and arrivals for that amount of money, of course, that you're spending, because these are all, at this moment, still one-time events per year that we do. We don't have the budget to do larger campaigns, but we're doing them smaller in order for us to at least cater to the various airlines that do fly here. And the last question I believe you had was regarding the vacancies. So as far as the vacancies, we are working on them. The process is a little bit, as we say, it's long. What happened is we did go through a process of recruiting for two positions in marketing, which are marketing officers. But at this moment, we're probably going, because we had chosen candidates, but unfortunately, some of the candidates were chosen that were internal, left us. So therefore, based on, we've decided actually collaboratively, we really need to redo it, because we understand also there is more interest and maybe possible candidates. So we want to open it up. So that will be done, you know, as soon as possible. Hopefully I can squeeze that in the first week of July. And in product development also, we're trying to finalize the section heads position, the permanent section heads position, so that we are able to start the recruiting for the product development officer. Does that answer the questions?
MP Brison, you have the floor.
Thank you for the answers, and those were pretty clear. There's one thing I think also important, maybe for the Tourist Bureau to clarify. In 2021, were you able to allocate and spend the majority of your budget? And in 2022, if there were no instructions to hold off or to, I don't know what this instruction is, but let's say you were able to continue with the budget as approved. Do you believe the Tourist Bureau, are you confident that the Tourist Bureau would have been able or would be able to spend and allocate all the funding, even within the bureaucratic system that you're facing?
Thank you, MP Brison. Ms. Chun, you have the floor.
Thank you. I believe so, because we put a new approach to what needs to be done in order for us to execute these plans. So when we were told we had that $7 million budget, we immediately basically put all the projects together that we wanted to execute. And we knew that even with a long process, that means that all hands were on deck. So we are not a structure that only specific persons write advices. So what we did is we got others on board to learn to write advices, to assist all of us in order for us to make sure that these advices go out, because we know the timing of the advice process takes longer. So we believe so. And some of these were larger projects. So when you hear 3 million, it is because you're dealing also with either a beautification project or an airline project, or you're doing an agritourism project, or even in marketing, if a campaign is running, the whole point is that you might have a campaign running for a specific area or a gateway that would have been executed. So I think in that sense, yes, we would. The answer is yes, we would have. And just one more thing, and some of these projects, they run into the next year. So it's not like once you write it, it's only till December. Some of these projects run for the whole year or 2 years, just to make clear.
Thank you, Ms. Chun. MP Brison, you need any further clarification? Okay, the next person on the list is MP Sarah Westcott. MP Westcott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, once again for the opportunity. Thank you to May and her staff for the presentation. Mr. Chairman, I want to stick on this budget thing because I want to stick on this budget thing. The budget 2021 for the tourist office. And now I'm not going to look so much at the personnel costs, but the material cost for the tourist office was approximately 8 million. 2021, yes. That was based on an amendment that increased several of the posts for the tourist office. The budget that the Tourist Bureau submitted for 2021, and I know how that process go with finance. You submit, you can get what you request, etc., etc. But were you able to do any of the things based, in addition to your own budget, based on the amendments to the budget? If you get what I'm asking. So you sent in a budget that became part of the general budget I'm talking 2021. And with the amendments, however, the material/operational cost of the Bureau was approximately, yes, 7.9789, about 8 million guilders, according to the budget. So were you able, given the late time that the budget was approved, were you able to start any of the additional things? That's one question. In that context, I would like to look at that. And then you are telling us that based on the 2022 budget, which is operational, so for all your marketing and promotion and those kind of things, 7.6 million guilders, that when you say you need to cut 3-point-something million, that's from your only the Tourism Bureau, and only from the operational cost of the Tourism Bureau, that you have to cut that money, is my question. So from what amount are you allowed or requested to cut the amount that you're supposed to be cut? And you said you looked at your programs and you kind of adjusted and reprioritized, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my question. Also tying into that, who are our marketing reps at this time, the major ones, our partners with whom we have contracts that we have to pay, and how is this going? Talking about the beautification of Phillipsburg, you might or maybe not, and I would appreciate if you do, if you can share it, have an update regarding where the vendors market plans are at this time. It was taken off of the budget because it was going to be financed by the harbor potentially. And do you have an update as to those plans and the execution of the plans? Getting the Phillipsburg vendors market reconstructed. Your information, your stats regarding Airbnb. There was a MOU or something like that signed with Airbnb. That was only to provide information, and is it there that you get your information from, or if not, then how? The matter of the disembarkation, are we thinking, one, about terminating the EHAS? That filing is a question, and what is the kickback now again with respect to getting digital disembarkation information? What's where you said that it's coming soon, but what is the kickback there? How were you able to deal with the matter of the carnival marketing and that whole matter, that now the money that was under the SCDF, St. Martin Carnival Development Foundation, yeah, was put under your budget for marketing. Have you thought about how that is to go? Is it going to be in collaboration with the Carnival Foundation? Was the Carnival Foundation paid in 2022? And if they were, how was that done? Was there a special agreement with the tourist office, between the tourist office and the Carnival Foundation, considering that that was one of the changes in the budget? The Expedia, the one that started or is about to be started, the big one, I think you called it, is that the same one with the SHTA that was announced? That's to come, okay. And then, okay, okay, and then the organization structure of the Tourism Bureau and your pitch for more flexible organization and reference to many places where it is not part of the bureaucratic government structure. So where are, if any, plans for such, and is it being reviewed again after the whole issue with the STA? You know, so where do we stand, if anywhere, where that matter is concerned? Mr. Chairman, that's those questions for now, and I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. MP Westcott. Ms. Chun, you have the floor, and I believe back and forth answers are not allowed, so it goes through the chairman.
Oh, okay. Yes, sorry about that. My apologies. Through the chairman. The 2021 increase in budget was it was late. That was in July. So at a time where this budget increase was approved, we were not able to execute, of course, such a substantial increase to execute projects in order for us to be able to execute them even in that year, in 2021 or 2022. So that did not happen. So when 2022 came, where we had the same 7 million, but we already started working on all the plans that we wanted to execute for 2022. So does that answer, is that clear? Sorry. Oh.
Yes, no, that's clear.
That's clear. Okay. And 21 budget and the 2022 budget. Okay. Through the chairman, the question about marketing representation, who are the firms? Is that correct? Yes, who are our firms? That is Big Ideas Advertising Incorporated is our firm that was specifically hired for digital marketing, who I believe last year we gave a presentation on different results of the marketing activities, the digital marketing activities they executed. They will be extended for another year, so that is in process right now, finalizing. So hopefully we can start with them in July. The next one is for the Europe market, which is USP, PR firm and marketing communications. Also, we're going to be extending that for a year, and also will be finalized soon, as well as Diamond PR and Marketing Communications, which does the USA and Canada for us. And they will be coming on board as well soon again in order for them to continue their projects and basically the objectives we have for marketing. Because at this moment, they're not active because we have to wait for the approval in order for us to start executing again all the marketing campaigns and projects. Does that?
Ms. Chun, have you answer all the questions by.
Oh,
MP
can I just continue?
Yeah, just
Oh,
continue,
sorry,
and then
my mistake.
if there's any clarification, MP Sarah will ask you.
So number 4, as far as beautification of Phillipsburg, I cannot answer on the execution of that plan, of the plan with the marketplace, because that doesn't fall under our budget. When we speak about beautification, is projects that we can do, such as collaborating with ICANN Foundation of the mural projects, which we collaborated with in phase 3, working with Phillipsburg Promotional Board or other partners in order for us to beautify certain alleys, or signage is something very important. So that was basically on one of our projects we wanted to do, is start working on the signage in Phillipsburg. So beautification and signage, all of that is what we would have been doing, not the marketplace. Airbnb, the MOU, at the time, May 3rd, I believe it was 2019, we had an MOU signed. The MOU was a memorandum of understanding in order for us to move on to have a agreement, which they call a tax collective agreement, whereby the government and Airbnb work together to have a tax collection agreement. And that, of course, is something that we want in order for us to level the playing field, because we cannot not ignore our hotels and our accommodations that are part of the 5% government tax, as we call it. So, but that has been a bit of a challenge due to the fact that after pandemic, the Airbnb corporation also restructured. So the person that was assigned to St. Martin, it was very challenging to communicate with them, but it's still on our to-do list to get in touch with an Airbnb, let's say, executive, in order for us to put the finance department and Airbnb's tax collection department together in order for us to come to an agreement. And second, also for the rating, one of the things that has to be done, we have to start next year, is as far as all the home sharing sector properties have to also be assessed and identified. As far as online ED card, at the moment, we are actually collecting some statistics on tourists, because we have the EHA system. So we are utilizing the EHA system for data collecting, but it's limited and it's not, as we call it, cleaned up. So it is, thank God that we have that at least, but as a tourism department, the objective is to have your own online ED embarkation, disembarkation system in order for us to eliminate, any repeat. It's called basically any wrong data due to repetition of people constantly filling in the forms, etc. So when I say coming soon, I mean to say that we are working on hopefully being able to write the project and collaborate again once more with the other departments in order for us to be able to execute it by next year, hopefully. So, and at this moment, the EHAS is where we get some of the data from. So we can see actually where people are going, where they're staying, how long they're staying, where they're coming from as well. And that is where you find this data was collected, is because we had the EHAS system. But it needs to be really an online ED card system. The Carnival marketing budget post was established in with the previous budget, and this year Carnival had a subsidy. So there was a Carnival subsidy budget. So that subsidy was used to do to execute Carnival this year. That was done together with the tourist office. So the tourist office had we collaboratively looked at it, where the monies were going to be used and actions were going to be taken. So we definitely made sure that a lot of the media and journalist, visits and coverage in social media was used. Now, the Carnival marketing budget itself, it was too late, because as we know, that's a process, that's a public tender process, that's a substantial amount of 500,000 guilders, was not used but we've used certain smaller projects to assist certain, within Carnival. So the objective is to look at that again, to see how to use it more effectively. So at this moment, that is still standing with a substantial amount of budget to be able to execute projects with. And this can be also marketing Carnival in other regions. Expedia campaign, through the chairman. The Expedia campaign, we had an Expedia campaign we ran from November to February. That's the one I mentioned. Then the next one coming is the one with SHTA that we saw the announcement, the press release that we did together that the Minister Utley signed, which is where SHTA collaboratively with their partners basically accumulated close to $70,000. And St. Maarten had already a $25,000 budget approved in order for us to execute Expedia. So what we did is we decided to come together, and so now this total amount is being used to run a campaign starting this month until October, right? October, if I'm correct. Yeah, October. And then the other campaign that I said, the larger campaign, that is the 500,000 guilder campaign. That is a budget post on the budget that we were, of course, very pleased about because it gave us the opportunity to speak to Expedia and try to see how we best can disperse that, allocate those funds into the different markets that we then can test and also see an increase in bookings. And that is the 500,000 guilder that will run for 10 months. And that will be for the US, Canada, Europe, and what other countries in Europe? Sorry. Yeah. So the Europe part will be in Germany, Holland, the UK. So that is one that will run 10 months. And we will start that one actually once, we'll start discussing it now, but when October, the other one finishes, we'll start this one, which will run us into next year. So it gives us stability. And the stability, as we all know, Expedia produces and they book. So we're going to see the increase there. And we need it the most right now because this is the low season. What we don't want to talk about anymore is low season. Then number 8, organization. The organizational structure, that's being actually reviewed. One second. So I'm sorry about that. Through the chairman, as far as the organizational structure, we had last month a meeting with P&O that is as far as the government structure of the tourism department, which, as we all know, is outdated and it needs other team members or other staff members that carry responsibility. So we went through an extensive, I basically provided a tourism organizational chart of what it would look if it would stay under the organizational structure of the government, but basically is a structure that would pertain to a privatized organization, an independent administrative agency or a destination management organization. Because at the end of the day, you need the staff in order for you to execute. We know that the minister cabinet, they are researching right now and seeing for us to when and how we're going to execute the tourism authority as we know it, and that's as far as I can tell you about it, because no other further information is available. Yep. Does that answer?
That completes all the questions. Thank you, Ms. Chun. MP Westcott, do you have any clarification on them?
No, for now it's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The next person I have is MP Grisha Halliger Martin.
Thank you, Mr.
Grisha,
Chair.
you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. And thank you, Ms. Chun Mei-Ling, for your presentation. Thank you to your support staff, Ms. Arundel and Ms. Franken as well, for being here. During your presentation, One thing caught my attention was the restaurant rating. You mentioned that that's in the pipeline that you're working with that, and I'd like to know maybe if you can provide me with a little more details as to how you plan to execute that. Are you planning to have maybe critics, food critics? Where are you going to put that information out on your website? Is it maybe, are you going to work in collaboration with Big Ideas during the Big Ideas company to put it out as content-driven information? And I don't know if I missed it, but are you planning to also work with, in the near future, to work with more influencers? Why I ask that is a few weeks ago there was an influencer on the island with millions, I think over 10 million followers. And they went around all different parts of the island having fun. And that alone sparked 2 or 3 companies from getting more businesses from that alone. I mean, are you planning to work with more influencers, seeing that you're going mostly into the digital world? And lastly, in something that's always been close to my heart, and may you also know this, through you, Mr. Chair, brand ambassadors, local brand ambassadors. Are we planning to do more there with our soca artists when they go away, when they represent us? Do we have enough budget in place? Are we looking to expand more there? And lastly, 2 more points. I see you mentioned that you're working with the USP and the Diamond PR company. I remember in the past we also worked with one in Latin America, and that stopped. Is it because of the inflation in Latin America? What's the situation there? Why don't we have a marketing agency there as well? I know things are getting very bad there. I don't know if that's the reason, but we used to work with one a long time ago. Completely forgot his name, but I remember him clearly. Alfredo? Ricardo, yes, I remember him. Yes, that's a long time back. And lastly, the main question of all questions. What is the ultimate budget that the tourist office would need to work optimally? What is that number? What is that figure? I see you smiling, Ms. Franken. Looking forward to that answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's it for me.
Thank you, MP Grisha. Ms. Chun, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. Your question, MP, regarding restaurant rating. This is an objective we have, but would actually consider a third party. So it would be a public tender for a third party, because that's something we cannot do internally. There are systems in place. You don't really need to reinvent the wheel. So it was more from we were going to public tender a third party to be able to assist us to execute the restaurant rating. And this way, there's many different ones right now. I know New York is a major one that we were looking at as well. Being that's we are culinary capital of the Caribbean. We have a lot of variety of restaurants and food places. But there are some other ones we're looking at as well. So we believe that hiring a third party that has expertise in this is the way to go. So it's still in the beginning stages. So it's not something that we, have put out there yet or have promoted yet. Through you, Chairman, working with more influencers, yes, the answer is yes. We've started already. We screen them because everybody says they're an influencer. They love to come, and through travel, because you see they have some followers, they like to visit, and they believe then a lot of different locations all over the world bring them. But our budget is small, so we have to really screen it. You have to look who they target. You have to look what their following is, and sometimes, when they don't have 1 million followers, but they have less, but it's effective for your market, we will choose them. That is where basically the firms usually help us with those type of influencers. They tell us the following, they tell us who they target, they tell us the volume of business, and based on that, Nira and her team then, decide on it and execute. So we do work with them. We hope to see that we can start increasing that as well, because all of these type of activities go usually through our firms, international firms. Through you, Chairman, the brand ambassador, we have a local celebrity ambassador program that we want to execute this year still, which is not solely in the arts or, for example, as you mentioned, SOCA, but also in science, in business, in sports. So it's actually in the process of almost being approved in order for us to start it. So a committee has to be formed. And for the different categories, we will choose ambassadors, brand ambassadors that will be representing us in all these various sectors that I mentioned. And these are individuals and professionals that are all over the world, because we just found out a few are as far as Australia. So I think we should utilize this as soon as possible, as this will bring a larger network for us to promote our brand. Absolutely. Through you, Chairman, the Latin America rep. Yes, for many years we had a Latin America rep, Ricardo, but I'm trying to... Inter-America. Inter-America has for many years promoted St. Martin. We were going to hire them again, but unfortunately with the hurricane, unfortunately with the pandemic, South America also being the last to reopen, it was not the priority, but it will be the priority to discuss and put a public tender out this year still, in order for us to start executing it and have a South America rep again. But there again, too, cuts have to be made, so you're very limited. But at least, you know, it's yeah, you got to do with what you have. And yeah, the ultimate. That's a question, if you ask me, the ultimate budget. I would have to revisit and really look at what do we want to accomplish. We want to accomplish quality over quantity, because at the end of the day, there's so many amount of tourists we can bring. But I believe that in these last 2 years with the lockdown and having the opportunity to revamp ourselves, we have shown also that we can bring the tourists that spend more money and we can target better. So I think based on all of these factors, I think we need to revisit again, make that a working session to really, what do we want from this? Because it's not only tourism marketing, it is development, it's investment, and as long as tourism stays the major source of income for this economy, we need to seriously sit down. And if you ask me, I would say, yeah, I can sit here and say, I would like 20 million right now. But with that comes the right structure, the right amount of people to execute, because if we keep asking but do the same and staying in the same organizational structure, it's not going to work. So once we do, I think we need to take it step by step. Once we decide that we're going into this independent administrative, or whichever we want to call it, privatization, we are able then to say, this is the amount of money. What do we want to target? How many people? Or what is the tourism receipt we want? And then we establish that tourism budget. Does that answer everything?
Thank you, Ms. Chun. MP Grisha, you have any clarification? Fine. The next person on the list is MP George Pantofle. MP George, you have the floor.
Pantofle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you, my colleague on my left, MP Halaga, just posed a question concerning the budget, so that's already been answered. I definitely believe, Mr. Chairman, that and indeed the issue of quality over quantity is important. As a matter of fact, I'm sure we have read in the newspaper where they try to sell mullet beer or whatever, which again would be fine, because I would sit then to ensure that the one that buys it, that they set up a 5-star hotel, Mr. Chairman, because then we could talk about quality also, because we have none at this moment. The issue with no season, I love that, because I always say we shouldn't have this issue of every time off season, low season, no. And I think that the cooperation between the government and the private sector is very important when it comes to investment. I was very happy to see where The $25,000 was turned into $65,000 or $90,000, which is good. Not enough, I'm quite sure, because marketing is very expensive, but I believe it is a start. I have a kind of a, before I get to that question, the issue of the EHAS was mentioned to you, Mr. Chairman, that the data is used in order to determine the visitors, where they come from, where they stay, how long they stay, and so on. But my thing is, how long are we going to remain with the EHAS? Because the fact is, if you look at the US right now, a lot of things are being canceled and so on. And I think that the EHAS, while the data is being used in order to determine the tourists, where they come from and so on, I think that it is also kind of a hindrance right now to us really having more persons come to. And that's my opinion, Mr. Chairman. I believe that, again, we should look at canceling out EHAS and allowing persons to travel freely more to St. Martin, like some other countries are already doing. It's a very ticklish question, but I can ask it and it doesn't have to be answered if it's not possible. When we had the SHT here, Mr. Chairman, the last time, I asked them a question regarding to a particular tax that I have on my WhatsApp. I have a copy of it where this particular hotel, so I don't know how much insight the tourism department has into that, but they were charging VAT and city tax. So I do not know how much insight the department has into that, but is that legal? Is that allowed? Because I hear mentioned 5% government tax, but on this invoice it has VAT and also city tax mentioned on that invoice. So is that legal or is that definitely allowed? I think that's all for now, Mr. Chairman. I await the response and I thank you very much.
Thank you, MP George. Ms. Chun, you have the floor.
Thank you, MP, through you, Chairman. As far as because we answered already regarding the EHAS, but the EHAS, when it will stop, or that is something I cannot answer due to the fact that falls under the Ministry of VSA. So they will determine when that will be. And also, as far as the SHTA, the question you have on VAT and city tax that one of the particular hotels is putting on their billing, I am not aware of that either, so I cannot answer that.
Thank you, Ms. Chun. MP George, you have any clarification?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the answer. It was a suggestion with regards to the EHAS. I know that the minister is the one who has to decide whether, but I was just saying a suggestion to myself. I would say, well, how much would it benefit us, I believe, based on what's happening if it is taken away. It's not that I'm asking as to when it's going to take place. Because I know that definitely that's a prerogative of the Minister of Economic Affairs of VSR, as a matter of fact. Regarding the VAT and the city tax, I'm glad you respond to that in the sense that you don't know, because even when I asked the SHTA, I was told by the director that he thinks he's not sure, probably it's a mistake or whatever. And so far I haven't received any other response, so I'll have to do another follow-up with the minister where that's concerned. But I believe because if that is being deducted, these taxes belong to government. And we need every cent we can get in order to put it into our marketing for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George. The next person I see is MP Brison. MP Brison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, once again. And I wanted to close off with that point, and it seems that MP Pantoflet and myself were on the same page, because I wanted to close off on this issue of budgeting, because what most, you heard from Ms. Chun described all of these different countries that have what we call DMOs. And one of the key advantages those DMOs have is that the government tends to give them the task and the mandate on behalf of the government to collect the hotel tax. Now, Mr. Chairman, I remember you and I did like a very easy calculation looking at the average occupancy for the year, take these figures, take the average length of stay, average cost per night, and so on, and take 5% of that, it doesn't look like we are collecting all that we should. This can be maybe because travel agents are not remitting, hotels or whatever, I'm not sure. But one of the things that I think would help certainly significantly is when moving to STA, DMO, whatever it is, that they also receive the mandate to collect. And then based on that, they also are able to have that as their budget. Now, it wouldn't literally be this department going out and collecting. One thing you can do, for example, is hire ATS, which does the auditing and collections for SZV and tend to do, from what I've heard, a pretty good job in that regard. You work with them, they audit the various hotels, and they say, okay, based on your occupancy, actually, this is what you need to pay. I believe personally that we're losing out so much because we have the lowest hotel tax in the entire Caribbean at 5%. The Caribbean average is about 12% now. So even if you were to raise it to 10%, you would still be below the average of the entire Caribbean. So I think that's something that we've posed questions to the Ministry of TEATT on before, what the plans are to do that, but I think it should be allocated. What I'm saying is this, though. Regardless of whether that increase comes or not, at a minimum, I believe the tourism budget should be equal to, or at the minimum equal to, what we collect in timeshare and hotel tax. It just makes sense. That's literally what the tourists are contributing back. And right there, if you take those numbers in the proper years, you're supposed to be around 7 million. That is also the logic behind providing that 7 to 8 million guilder budget, was also based on, well, if you fill these rooms, you're gonna get it back. And you're not getting it back from the Sematna or from the taxi driver or from anybody else. You're getting that back from the person that comes to the country and spends $100 on a hotel, and just $5 extra is added. Nobody is going to stop coming to St. Maarten because now instead of $105, they have to pay $110. Nobody gonna say, nah, boy, St. Maarten too expensive. That right there is exactly, to me, one of the number one missions we need to do. Allocate the budget based on what we collect. That's fair and simple. If you look at the recent report from the Audit Chamber, where they looked at road tax should go to road repairs. That's not happening. Well, if we continue to cut the tourism budget, we're also not putting those taxes where they belong, which is back in the hands of marketing so it can recirculate. So I wanted to bring up that point as well. Regarding the EHAS, I wanted to give a bit of a perspective on that. Having done a lot of research with regards to the health levy and that process, I was able to have different work meetings with the Ministry of VSA. And one of the things they have is an email address where you can complain or give feedback on the EHAS. And the number one complaint, or really the only complaint people have, is that the EHAS is not instant. So it's not that they mind filling in a form, because when we go to the States, even with a Dutch passport, we have to fill in an ESTA. If you're a non-European Union passport holder, you want to enter the EU, you have to go online and fill in something new. That's a normal thing now. The issue is that it should be instant. I do think we should permanently have this information portal. It does a lot for us for security, for health, and for marketing. It should just be a very simple thing. Maybe some of those fields need to be deleted. It should be a 1-minute process. Bop, 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 fill it in, and you get an automatic approval right away. I do think that's something we should look into, but I don't think that we should completely get rid of the EHAS. I actually think it should be a permanent feature, but one that's instant instead of temporary. And one last thing, just to chime in on what MP Pantaflet said, indeed, there are some hotels, some properties, maybe that would have been something more for Mr. Wilson from inspection to go and see. But they are adding fees that look as if it's a government tax, which it's not. And that's, again, another argument why maybe you need to look at increasing the fee, because they will add the 5% and then add a 10% resort fee, this fee, VAT, and so on, and the customers are paying. Why can't the country get a little bit more out of what the customers are paying? And I think in the previous meetings that I've had, and I would ask maybe just this question, have you sat with the hotels and get a sentiment as to whether they would be open? I mean, they don't need to be open, so to speak, but as a stakeholder, if we were to increase the hotel tax to 5 to 10%, so maybe you do 8, 9, and then 10% over the next 3 years, have that discussion with the hotels and say, if all of that money was going to marketing the country, if you would accept it. And I'm willing to bet that the feedback the department would get is yes. If you are putting the money to product development and marketing, go right ahead. I mean, they just did it. They put 25,000 guilders or 45,000 guilders directly to Expedia on their own together with the government. But $75,000, yes, you know. SHTA, IMA, all of them came together. They're doing it unofficially. So let's do it officially. Raise the tax, appropriate it to tourism and marketing, and we will solve a lot of the budgetary issues.
Thank you, MP Brison. Ms. Chun, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. The question raised regarding if we have this conversation with the hotel to increase the tax structure. Actually, this is a conversation we had way back 10 years ago when we were discussing privatization already. And the private sector always indicated if we know there is a structure, or if they know there is a structure in place, and we would increase the tax, hotel tax, let's call it that for now, and knowing that it goes towards tourism, they would have no issues with that. Now, it would be nice to ask that again, and I'm sure, but I can't vouch and put my hand in the fire for it, but I'm sure that if we ask them again, and they will say, give the same answer. That's it, yes?
That was only one question? Okay. Anyone else? Well, most of the MPs have spoken. I would just like to add one point, if you may be elaborating on that. We spoke in every angle except regional tourism. Can you elaborate something on getting regional tourism? Because what I see there is 1.4, which to me makes it a very low number and in so close proximity that why can't we attract them here?
With pleasure. Chairman, regional tourism is very important, just like all the other tourism sectors, other regions. But there are reasons why this has not been, you know, we haven't been as aggressive in this area for many reasons, and that's why you see these numbers being low. When we decided we have to do more in the regional area, of course, we know what happened in 2017. But we were recovering, so what we did is we prioritized, especially in the areas where we know we needed to get the return. So then afterwards also, with limited budget, we were doing somewhat of regional activities, but not enough. So then when the pandemic came, we said, okay, we have to increase the, not when the pandemic came, it was before that actually, we already said we're increasing the regional tourism budget to 500,000. Then the pandemic hit, and of course, being that the Caribbean is so much affected, it didn't make sense to spend your money in the area, in the region where others have the same issues as you. So they were everybody had different requirements. You know, tourism is the main income. So it was not, we don't think it was smart to start spending the funds into the Caribbean region. So we did say, okay, this year we are going to. We have a limited budget, but we decided we're hiring actually a third party for dollars through social media. You know, making sure also we work with Winair to do a cooperative marketing campaign, because after all, they are the airline that has the most destinations, I believe 16. And this way, try to have, and Caribbean Airlines, of course, not to mention that they are flying again Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaica. These are all destinations that have always come to St. Maarten, but are willing to come to St. Maarten again because of the retail shopping. But now beyond that, it's not only that, they like to vacation here because of so many attributes, what we have available and accessible. So it's not only shopping. So our goal is at least through a third party, just like we do with the other regions, to have them execute the marketing activities for us. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Chun. No one? Okay, if there are no further comments, I would like to thank the civil servants of the Ministry of TEATT for their presence here today and for providing the necessary information. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this meeting. I thank you all for your participation, and I hereby close this meeting.